The morning sunlight pierced through the blinds like thin blades, scattering across the wooden floor and stabbing straight into my skull. My head pounded in a deep, throbbing rhythm, the kind that made sound itself feel heavy. My mouth was dry, my skin warm, and my senses strangely slow. I pushed myself up, confused, only to find that the room I was in was not mine. For a moment, I sat still, letting the fog clear just enough to realize I was in someone else's bed, someone's house, and I wasn't wearing my clothes. I forced my blurry vision to focus as a wave of panic rose in my chest. That was when she walked in. Emily Carter, my neighbor, a woman whose gentle presence stood in remarkable contrast to the chaos in my mind. She had a folded stack of clothes in her hands and a look on her face, a mixture of concern, exhaustion, and a hint of something deeper, something like hurt. When she softly said, "You don't remember last night? I got you into bed," my breath caught. My voice cracked as I managed to say, "Then where are my clothes?" Before you hear the rest of this unbelievable story, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps us bring more meaningful stories like this to you. Emily didn't answer my question immediately. She just stared at me, letting silence fill the room until it felt almost alive, pulsing in the small space between us. She placed the clothes on the dresser and told me to relax, that she'd explain everything once I'd fully come to my senses. But fear, embarrassment, and confusion didn't wait for explanations. They rushed me all at once. That was the beginning of a day that would unravel not only what had happened the night before, but a truth about my life I had been running from for far too long. A truth Emily had seen before I ever dared to acknowledge it. My name is Andrew Miller, 33 years old, born and raised in Ohio, now living alone in a small town in North Carolina after my marriage collapsed 2 years ago. I wasn't a wreck back then, just a man trying to survive heartbreak. But as time passed and loneliness set in deeper than I expected, the cracks spread. Nightly drinks became weekend binges. Weekend binges turned into something darker, something I told myself I had under control. But the truth was, I was slipping, and I didn't know how to stop. Emily had moved into the house next door 6 months earlier, a single mother with 2 jobs, navigating a life that hadn't been easy on her either. But unlike me, she faced her struggles with strength, not escape. We spoke occasionally, casual, neighbor interactions, small kindnesses, shared smiles in the yard. I never imagined she would one day save me from myself. As I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing, Emily finally took a deep breath and told me the truth. She found me the previous night lying on the sidewalk near my driveway, half conscious, drenched from the rain that had poured earlier. My car door was wide open, the engine still running, my phone broken from a fall, and my speech nearly incoherent. She called for help, but I refused the ambulance, terrified of another hospital bill I couldn't afford. So she did the only thing she could. She carried me inside her home, dried me off, put me in clean clothes from her brother's old stash, and stayed awake most of the night to make sure I didn't choke or slip into something worse. Hearing this felt like being punched in the chest. Shame crept up my spine like a cold hand. I apologized over and over, each word collapsing under the weight of my humiliation. But Emily just shook her head, telling me that I didn't owe her anything, that anyone with a heart would have done the same. But not everyone would have. Not everyone would have risked judgment or inconvenience. Not everyone would have stayed up to make sure a broken man didn't stop breathing. As the morning went on, the fog in my head cleared, but the heaviness in my chest only deepened. Emily cooked breakfast for her daughter and moved around the kitchen with the silent efficiency of someone used to holding everything together alone. Watching her stirred something painful inside me, something I'd buried long ago. My life had once been full, married, stable job, dreams of a family, but pain changes people. My ex-wife Sarah left after years of fighting my growing dependence on alcohol, after countless promises I broke and apologies I couldn't back up. I wasn't violent or cruel. I was absent, drifting, watching life happen rather than living it. When she walked away, she took the last bit of light from my life with her. The worst part? I didn't fight for her. I was too ashamed of the man I had become. Emily didn't know my story, yet somehow she looked at me like she understood the part of me I tried to hide. She had this way of speaking gently but with a firmness that made me listen. She told me I wasn't the first neighbor she'd helped, that people in pain didn't need judgment. They needed someone to see them as human. That day, she asked a simple question that would change the course of my life. "Andrew, do you want to keep living like this?" It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was honest, raw, and pierced through the walls I'd built around myself. I couldn't answer her. My throat tightened, my eyes burned. I hadn't cried in years, but standing in her kitchen, I felt the first tear slip down. Emily placed a hand on my shoulder, not as pity, but as a lifeline. Something in that small gesture cracked me open. The weight of years of loneliness, regret, and failure came crashing down. For the first time, I admitted the truth. I needed help, and I didn't know how to ask for it. Over the next few weeks, Emily checked on me regularly. At first it bothered me, it felt like pity. But I soon realized it wasn't pity, it was care, genuine care, the kind I hadn't felt in a long time. She encouraged me to attend support meetings, and though I resisted, eventually I went. I didn't speak on the first visit, or the second. But listening to people share their stories made me feel less alone, less broken. Slowly I started rebuilding my life. I reduced my drinking, then stopped completely. I found small routines to keep myself grounded. Morning walks, journaling, cooking simple meals. Emily noticed the changes, and every little encouragement from her felt like fuel to keep going. But recovery isn't a straight line. One night, about 2 months after that morning in her home, everything came crashing down again. Work had been brutal, my boss was threatening layoffs, bills were piling up, and loneliness clawed at my chest like it used to. That night I found myself pacing in my kitchen, staring at a bottle I'd hidden in the back of a cabinet. Long before my supposed new beginning, the temptation was crushing. The silence of my house felt suffocating. I reached for the bottle, gripping it so tightly my knuckles went white. I sat on the floor, shaking, fighting myself, tears slipping down my face. I didn't know what I wanted more, to drink or to scream. But then I remembered something Emily had said once, when I told her I didn't deserve help. You don't need to deserve care to be cared for. Those words were like a hand pulling me back from the edge. I threw the bottle into the trash, grabbed my hoodie, and walked out of my house into the cold night. Without thinking, without hesitation, my feet carried me to Emily's porch. When she opened the door and saw the state I was in, she didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She simply stepped aside and let me in, placing a warm blanket over my shoulders and sitting beside me on the couch. That night wasn't dramatic. There were no grand speeches or emotional outbursts, just two people sitting in silence, her presence reminding me that I wasn't fighting alone. Little by little, life began to shift. Not dramatically, not instantly, but gently, quietly, gradually. Emily's daughter, who used to be shy around me, began leaving little drawings on my doorstep. Smiling sons, stick figure families, pictures of me walking their dog. Those drawings became small anchors in my darkest moments. Some mornings Emily and I shared coffee on our porches, watching the neighborhood wake up around us. She'd ask how I was really doing, and slowly, I learned to answer honestly. That honesty became the foundation of something unexpected between us. Something warm, something healing, something like hope. But the real turning point came on a rainy evening, 6 months after the night she found me on the sidewalk. Emily and I were sitting on her porch as the sound of raindrops danced across the roof. She looked at me with a softness I wasn't sure I deserved and said, "Andrew, I'm proud of you." I didn't know how deeply I needed to hear those words until they hit me. For the first time in years I felt seen. Not as a failure, not as a burden, but as a man trying, fighting, changing. And in that moment, something inside me healed. What Emily did for me wasn't extraordinary in her eyes, but in mine, it was everything. She didn't save me with dramatic gestures. She saved me with kindness, patience, and the quiet belief that broken people can be rebuilt. This story isn't about romance. It's about humanity. It's about how one person's compassion can redirect the entire course of another's life. It's about second chances, how they find us in the most unexpected ways, through people who choose to see us not for what we were, but for what we can still become. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing real, emotional, and powerful stories to life. Before we end, I want to ask you one thing. Comment below with 3 words that describe what second chances mean to you. And with that, remember, sometimes the people who appear in your life at the lowest moment aren't there by accident. Sometimes they are the reminder that you're still worth saving.